where we are in the healthcare setting and where the healthcare personnel, whether it's a doctor or a nurse, can offer the person who may have HIV treatment, whether it's ARVs or other treatment, but which can save that person's life, we should make it much easier for the test to happen. A lot of people in South Africa have taken VCT testing, and I'm glad about that. It might be 1 million, it might be 2 million people, Mark, who know what their HIV status is, but it's not enough. We've got nearly 6 million people in South Africa, and we want them all to know that they've got HIV, because knowledge is power.
And Mark, what are the points that you tend to differ with? Because I understand that you differ from Edwin quite a lot.
Where I think I differ with Edwin is just on the importance of pre-test counselling and how important pre-test counselling remains in relation to an HIV test. Edwin says that we should do away with it. I think that pre-test counselling is necessary to help people with disclosure. It's necessary to help people prepare for the discrimination they may face. It's necessary, very necessary, to help people to understand treatment, if treatment is going to be relevant for people. So I say, yes, make testing more accessible. Yes, make testing routine. But simultaneously, invest in more counsellors. That doesn't mean that everybody needs an hour of counselling before an HIV test. Some people may need 3 or 4 minutes, but some people may need half an hour to take them through the issues that they'll have to consider. And the very last point I'd like to make is that knowledge of HIV status isn't always power. So the HIV test is not a magic solution to a lot of the problems that we face.
Don't you think that most of the factors of counselling are actually taken care of in the post-test counselling, of which I'm sure Judge Edwin Cameron actually is saying that post-test counselling is still an important and vital matter that needs to be taken care of after a person is checked?
Well, Shalom, I think that's an important question. I think it's something the support group should talk about, because in my experience, quite often post-test counselling doesn't happen. People get tested and then almost they're kind of thrown back into society. If there was proper post-test counselling, not just for people who test positive, but for people who test negative, then certainly we could say, well, what has to be conveyed pre-test may not be so important. But as with so many aspects of our response to HIV, very often things fall down once a person has an HIV diagnosis. They don't get counselling, they don't get care, they don't get advice, they don't get antiretroviral treatment.
Manje ngoba sesizwile izivakashi zethu, ake sizwe ukuthi nithini ninamalungu e-support group.
It's not an exciting thing to go for an HIV. It's not like nobody posted and namhlanje, at least there's still time tomorrow, I will go back again tomorrow. No. It's something like, let me test and get it over with.
Exactly what Busi is saying. Exactly what Busi is saying. Busi is quite correct and say...
Yes, exactly. But what I'm saying again is that ngenxa pre-test, you might change your mind.
Thank you.
Yes.
What I'm saying, what the judge is saying is that, or what Mark is saying is that, testani, ne? And the judge and Mark differ on one thing, that counselling. Now, when you say that you cannot just test because abantu babuye and abantu abazi in the right manner and abantu are prepared. And Ulihle comes up with a very good point in saying that, no, let us create the situation and a scenario for people to agree for testing and to feel like testing. That means prepare people for testing. Not just buzzing and talk about test. Let people know that there's HIV. Let people know that if they happen to test HIV positive, there's treatment waiting for them. Exactly. There's treatment on opportunistic infections. There's a treatment.
There's counts as well.
Exactly. There's a chance for people to manage impilo yabo.
It depends on what type of pre-test counselling. Pre-test counselling shouldn't be something that aims to put a person off being tested for HIV. It should be something that is part of encouraging, recommending, supporting a person to test for HIV, but giving them the vital tools that they need. I just want to make one last point, because Botswana is often given as an example of where this routine testing policy has worked. But what I find funny about Botswana is that lots of people now know their HIV status, but people still live with HIV individually, huddled, silent, in stigma, without any type of sharing. There's only about 10 people in the whole of Botswana who are open about living with HIV infection. So clearly, in this process of testing, there hasn't been any empowering of people who have HIV about how to live with this virus. And those are my concerns, really, I think.
into ebengifuna ukisho makho ukuthi ngiyavumelana into eningi oyishoyo nokubaleka kwe-counselling kodwa into eshiwo Edwin ibaleka kakhulu indaba yokuthi mangabe umuntu eya for testing fanele siqale ukuthi abantu bayibone njengento ya everyday lento kufanele siqale ukuyinormalize i-HIV as a manageable disease and not as a chronic illness lokho kuchaza ukuthi njengoba mabuye kudokotela ucomplaina noma ingapha ama-pains lapho isitho somzimba sibhlungu la noma unalokho udokotela routinely ngekaza lokho akunamciblishola akuna red tape azodlula kuyona ukutshela ukuthi ayike fune ngikutestele i-diabetes fune ku-consent to X, Y and Z udokotela does his job wenza i-test ekumele uthi ayenze ukuze akudiagnose naleyo nto ukuze akwazi uku-offerisha i-treatment ukuze ukwazi ukumanage leso simo.
If we talk about routine testing, are we talking about everybody in the car crash that comes in? Because there is something that really bothers me, and this is where I must agree with Vianney, is like, for instance, take Aberdeen, where there's no treatment available. I think we're gonna do more damage in such an area with routine testing. But I do agree with routine testing, but if treatment and counselling is available, yeah, do it there. So I don't know, can you just explain to me what you mean with routine testing?
We must make a distinction between routine testing and mass testing. We're not talking about going out and catching everyone in South Africa and bringing them in and taking their blood. We're talking about someone who comes to the doctor in the healthcare setting or to the clinic or to the nurse. And that person is presenting with some symptom that would make that health carer say, I think that this might be HIV. We've all seen it. We see it every day in our workplaces and our communities where we think that person is not looking well. And if you're a health carer, you would test that person for HIV. In that situation, the health carer should be able to test for HIV unless the person says, no, I don't want. That's what we call routine testing.
Many people who live with HIV who have been tested incorrectly without counselling and without necessary measures has only came back by luck when they got sick and they got either through TB like me or either other illnesses, pneumonia and others. Like, for instance, Comrade Ronald Lowe could not get that luck because never tested. He was within the field, he understood a lot of things around HIV. He took out a personal responsibility to fight a lot of battles. Now, I say that we need to create a society that don't have those battles so that people can respond effectively.
The norm in most of our hospitals today is that people are tested without counselling. That's still the norm. Many people are tested without giving permission, and they don't go out of that process as empowered people who go and seek treatment and go and seek care. As Vianney said, very often they go out and they hide and they don't know how to tell their husband or their wife or their boyfriend or their girlfriend. So for me, what I see out of this is that we can have this discussion, but our society as a whole has to create more tolerance, create more knowledge, create more information so that the individual decisions that we all have to take are helped by a more supportive environment. And I'm not asking for an ideal policy. I do agree with Edwin and with all of us. There's urgency about this because, as Shalom said, people are dying today who don't need to be dying today. But even as we move on that basis, we have to be very, very careful that we don't hurt a lot of people as a result of our good intentions.
We know so much about AIDS. We know people are scared of it. We know that there's stigma. We know that there's discrimination. We know that people are dying unnecessarily. But the most important thing we know about AIDS is what Tammy has said, which is that this is now a medically manageable viral particle. Everything we do has got to be directed towards treating HIV as just another illness. We've got to get to the point, whether this year or next year or in 10 years' time, where it is simply a viral particle that can be totally managed in more than 90% of the cases of where people have HIV. And we've got to be careful that we are not protecting people so much that we're protecting them into not receiving treatment and keeping their lives.
We have to, at all times, try to respect the dignity of people who live with HIV and people who don't live with HIV. So we may not, or we may have had some arguments today, but at the end of the day, I do think that as a group of people, we do agree that testing is a critical intervention that needs to be scaled up and that needs to be scaled up fast.